So this workshop will focus on the technology that parliamentarians and presiding officers need to level up their meeting experience. There will be discussion about cameras, lighting, yay, lighting, audio requirements, and a few tips on communicating with a remote presiding officer, which will also be something new and different. C.A. Cavin is a licensed Oklahoma attorney and a credentialed parliamentarian as well. He is the full-time parliamentarian for the Oklahoma House of Delegates, which dealing with House of Representatives certainly can be a full-time job. He serves as treasurer also for the American Institute of Parliamentarians, treasurer for the American College of Parliamentary Lawyers, and is a past president of the Oklahoma State Association of Parliamentarians. So please welcome CJ Cavin. CJ.
Well, thanks, Marilyn. I am excited to be here. And when she reads past president of the Oklahoma State Association of Parliamentarians, that's from about a month ago, and I could not be happier. That's my favorite new title is past president. So, well, I'm excited to be here and talk to Arizona parliamentarians about the tech side of kind of the world we're living in. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about just some of the generic technology that I think you need as you're sitting in your offices at home, or maybe your offices in an actual office space. But because we're all attending a lot of meetings virtually these days, I think it makes sense for us as professionals, especially if we're working with clients, to add a few elements to our workspace to really level up what we're showing our attendees. And as Marilyn said, I've pretty involved as a parliamentarian, but a lot of my parliamentary practice has evolved a little bit over the past 2 years, as has all of ours, I anticipate. The way that mine has changed is I've spent a lot more time working with the technology side, working with the virtual meeting side or the hybrid meeting side. If you were on a few minutes before we got started, Ray and I were talking about kind of the technology needed for hybrid meetings. So we're going to talk a little bit about the lights, the camera, a lot of that technology piece, and then at the end, as we have time, I'm going to show maybe some tips and resources for if you're serving as a remote parliamentarian or you're advising a remote presiding officer. What are some easy ways to kind of relay information to them or to get their attention? And what are some of those unique challenges that maybe we don't experience in person? So the main part of my presentation is called Lights, Camera, Action. It's all about the lights, the camera, and how to make it all work. And so a couple of things that I want to cover. Just one, what are some basic things that you need to think about for setting up your office or your workspace or wherever you're going to be at as you're serving as a parliamentarian, or really when you're doing anything? I'm not going to be sharing a screen. You can see my face, you can see my slides. And this is one of the things that I'm going to be talking about as we move throughout the next couple of minutes together. So setting up your office, how do you want it to function? What's the look and feel? How do you want to feel when you're in that space? But more importantly, what do you want it to do? I'm going to talk about some of the equipment that I use. And every time I give a version of this presentation, I have to go back and tweak a bunch of slides because I'm constantly changing my space. I'm constantly making it better and upgrading it and finding a new piece of technology that I want to use or try that helps streamline my own workflow. And we're going to talk about what that is a little bit. And then, as I mentioned, I want to talk about remote presiding officers. What are some of the technology challenges that we're going to face and a couple of potential solutions? So setting up your space. First, I want to talk about the functionality. What do you want it to do? And I think there are three things that you will want to do and I'm probably going to use the word studio because I often joke that my office is a recording studio, and you'll see why in a few minutes. So what do you want to do in your space? Well, I think there's three things: live video, recorded video, and basically podcasting or audio recording. So live video is what I guess most of us are currently using any of our office space for, any of our workspace for, because we're doing a lot of Zoom calls. We're doing a lot of WebEx calls or whatever the platform might be. We're spending a lot of time in front of that computer camera. So I think we're doing a lot more live video than probably anything else. But as you're setting up your space, if you're serving as a remote parliamentarian, that live video component is going to be really crucial. But I also focus a lot on the recorded video component as well. For a lot of my clients, what they've started asking for is a lot more training materials that they can kind of share again and again and again, so that we're not using, because we still can't do a lot of in-person stuff, even as people are getting vaccinated. Obviously, the new variant is keeping some things closed, and as well. So I'm doing a lot of recorded video as well, and then a lot of podcasting and audio recording. And I say podcasting and audio recording because that's going to be stuff that maybe they're not going to see your face; they're just going to hear your voice. So if you're doing a PowerPoint with a voiceover, that would be what I'm talking about for an audio recording. Or if you're doing, I do a lot of training videos where I'm physically showing people, go to this website and click this link and do these things. And I want them to see that, but I also want them to hear my instructions with that as well. So these are the three things that I think we all need to consider as we're talking about technology and setting up any sort of special place that we would be doing this with. And I'm going to just give you a shortcut to the end. I'm going to provide some budget options. I'm going to show you what I use, and believe me, you do not have to have a recording studio in your house to get really high quality live video, recorded video, or even podcasting or audio recording options. You can do that with some really simple, basic, fairly inexpensive technology, and we're going to talk about that. So what are some of the things that you would like to show on screen? We're going to go through a couple of questions. That way you can think about, what are you going to use this space for? What are some of the things that you do or would like to do? So one of the big questions is, what things would you like to show on the screen? Well, obviously there's the screen share. And again, I'm glad Al mentioned that, as we had previously discussed. How are you going to screen share? How are you going to show that slide deck, or how are you going to show your video? You got to talk about that. You got to think about that. Zoom makes it easy. You hit share screen and you're done. But with that, it's got some limitations. You'd only be able to share that PowerPoint file. So you can see on my screen, I've got, at least what I'm sharing, you can see my face. You can see, my business logo. I forgot to take that off. Since the last time I did this, it was for a client. But in that big spot, basically that 2/3 spot, you can see my slides. I've dropped those into to a spot so that you could see my face, so that we could connect at least virtually, face to face. But you could also see the content that I want to share as well. I could set that up to be a separate camera. So if I wanted to show my face and then, maybe have, Robert's open on my desk and have a camera flipping through some of those pages kind of as a teaching moment, we could do that as well. So just some things to think about with share screen. You can do multiple camera angles, picture in picture, kind of what we're doing now. This is kind of a really elaborate way to do this. There's basic ways to do this, but not inherently in Zoom, where your photo is on top of either your slides or a document that you might be sharing or something like that. You could play recorded videos. I think this is becoming more and more common for good reason. You can have really great high produced videos that you can get ready in advance and maybe take a little bit of the pressure off to do everything in the meeting or in your training session. So I've started doing a lot more recorded videos as well, recording them in the exact same system that I'm using now to do all of this, but then doing some light editing, getting them ready, playing them through the software that I'm using without really making any changes. And this is incredibly important for those virtual or hybrid meetings where you've got a program. At this time, we're going to do this. You can kind of get all that built out in order. Then as you go through, you're just clicking buttons to get everything playing. So that's a really great aspect to the world we're currently living in. Do you want to play music? What I loved that when I first logged in was, Ray was playing music in the background. That's a great way to enhance that user experience, especially during breaks or especially leading up to the beginning of a session. I think playing music, what's that user attendee feeling? What's that experience for them? I think that's awesome. And I think more and more the clients that I work with are doing that. So a scrolling ticker. Do you want to do something like that? I didn't set one up for this, but if you had, maybe you wanted to do announcements, or maybe you wanted to do your speakers queue, the people who were next in line, you could have kind of scrolling information across the bottom to share that information if you wanted to, or countdown timers. I don't know that I have one set up, but doing a countdown timer is good for a bunch of reasons. The first reason is if you're counting down towards your event starting, that's always great for people to know how much time they have left without checking their watch, trying to figure out what time the next session starts. Just having something on screen with that countdown timer. But what I use countdown timers for is for speaker clocks, basically. How much time does an individual, how much time do we have to talk about this topic overall? Do we have 20 minutes for everyone to get their debate in? And do individuals have 2 minutes each or 3 minutes each? Hopefully we've adopted some sort of special rule where they don't have 10 minutes each. That's always a smart thing, I think. But I use countdown timers for a very specific parliamentary purpose, so that I know, so that the speaker knows, and more importantly, that the rest of the delegates or the assembly knows how much time they have left or not. And I like to visually display that so everyone's on the same page. So that's a little bit about the functions, those three things that we talked about, basically live, recorded, and then the audio feature as well. So setting up your office, how do you want it to look? How do you want it to feel? What are some of the things that you think are important so that as you're serving a client or as you're doing any number of things, it's a great space for you to be working in. So I think there's some important questions to ask yourself. What do you currently like about your space? Do you have a great chair that you can sit in all day? Do you have a really ergonomic desk and keyboard? Do you have everything within arm's reach? And what do you not like about your space? Is it too cluttered? Are things too cramped? Do you have a bunch of stuff on your desk that you don't use during meetings and they kind of get in the way? So just kind of think about that. And as we go through my desk setup, and I'm going to walk through what I'm currently looking at in just a few minutes, we can kind of talk about what works for me. And again, what works for me is not going to be what works for you. But I think that's really important. For example, I'm actually standing right now. When I present, I have to stand. I don't feel comfortable sitting down. I wouldn't be sitting down if I was in person with a client. So I try to replicate as much as possible what this would be like if we were all together in a room. So I'm standing, but I work at this desk a lot, and I don't stand the whole time. So this is actually an automatic sit stand desk. I've got a button pad that it'll move up and down because that's what works for me. You don't have to do an entire desk like that. You could get, something that sits on your desk that you just put your camera gear on or whatever, or your laptop on and move that up. But it's whatever makes you feel comfortable as you're working with clients or as you're doing remote presentations. So those are two specific questions I think you need to ask before you really start to think about what you want your studio to do or your office to do. So I want to talk about backgrounds, and specifically virtual backgrounds, whether to use them or not. And you can see that I'm not using one. Everything behind me is real. Those are real gavels mounted to the wall behind me. I don't use virtual backgrounds, and I'm going to talk about why. But whatever you do, you need that background to be professional, especially if you're working with a client. When you go on site, at least for me, I wear a suit and a tie and, shower that morning and shave and, make my hair and all of that for what little hair I have. So when you go on site with a client, you're going to look professional. You're going to look like you're on site, like you're being paid to be there, or it's a group that you work with. So you're going to look professional, and your background needs to be professional as well. It needs to be distraction free. If you got a lot of stuff going on in your background, a lot of people are going to be looking at that and not at you. And I like to tell people, remember, you're the story. If you're on a call for a specific reason, if they've invited you to be on the call, or to participate or to serve as their parliamentarian, they want to look at you and they want to interact with you and not get distracted by the things behind you. So for me, I've got a cork board mounted behind me. If I moved out of the way, you'd see a bunch of gavels back there as well. And I put some faux brick on the wall back there, and it just adheses to the wall to give it some texture, because I know that's what a lot of people are going to be looking at, what's going on behind me. And so I thought that was important to at least think about. So for virtual backgrounds, I don't use them. I don't particularly like them very much for a bunch of reasons. And I'm going to show a photo in just a second. But one of the things that we need to keep in mind for virtual backgrounds is they require some extra lighting. And the lighting that is needed for virtual backgrounds, anytime that lighting changes, so does the virtual background. It's hard to get that set 100% of the time. It's harder to control the quality than to just kind of, design something basic and simple and professional that you're just standing or sitting in front of. In this studio or office set, the things that people see, I think need to reflect your personality. They don't need to be a distraction, but maybe they can complement why you're there. So if you want to put, gavels like I have behind you, or your framed credentials or your NAP membership certificate, anything like that to kind of enhance that personality, I would certainly do. In my home office, which is where I am today, it's very, I don't want to say bland, but it's very basic. Gavels, kind of some lighting back there, not a whole lot. If I was to do this from my office at the state capitol building, because I've just recently redone my layout, I turn my camera on and you've got like 15 photos of my kids hanging on the wall. So just keep that in mind of what people might see behind you, in addition to what they might see you doing. So I think your studio or office is a reflection of your personality. So, and I love to show this photo. This is not a photo of my home or my office. This is a photo of a good friend of mine. He puts, there's no blinds on his window in his office, so he tapes up paper, sheets of paper on the window before he does a Zoom call with a client, because he knows the glare as it comes in through his window is going to wash out his background. And I don't know if there are any Star Wars fans on the call with me today. I'm a Star Wars fan, and every time I'm on a call with him and the lighting starts to change, it looks like he's slowly dissolving into the Force. He's just slowly becoming part of the background, and he's just being washed away. And so sometimes that natural light causes glare and washes out those virtual backgrounds. In my office, where I'm at, I've got windows. Those are closed. There's very little natural light coming in, but I've got a lot of lighting in the room that I can control. I can turn it off. I can turn it on. I've got a little button pad over here to do all of that. And so I can control all the lighting that way, no matter what's going on outside, whether it's 2 p.m. in the afternoon or 3 p.m. like it is right now, or 1 a.m. in the morning. If I'm doing a recording, and I generally record a lot of stuff in the middle of the night because my kids are asleep at that point, and I'm not worried about their little screams getting picked up on the microphone. I tend to record stuff a little bit later when it's dark out, but I still want a high quality look and feel to those videos, which is why I've added quite a bit of artificial light in this room. So let's talk about what sort of equipment that you may need, and that, obviously most of you have some version of it right now to participate in a Zoom call. I think there's 4 things that are hugely important: camera and lens, and all of the cords and connectors that go with that, mounting options, the camera, the lighting, microphones, they all have to go somewhere. They all have to be on something. And what are some of those options? We've talked a little bit about lighting, but depending on the use case, that lighting is going to be important. If you're only worried about being heard really well, maybe you don't want to focus so much on adding a lot of natural light. If the room that you're in has a lot of light already, artificial light, you may not need, to acquire something special for that purpose. And then microphone, and I put microphone as number 4, just in the way that I listed these. But I personally believe that audio is the most important thing. We've talked about video, the camera, the lens, the lighting, all of that stuff, but I think audio is the most important thing. Because I don't know, at least for me, if I'm watching a YouTube video or a movie or something like that, I'll put up with bad video for a while. I will not put up with bad audio hardly at all. If it sounds bad or sounds low, or it doesn't sound natural, or something like that, I'm probably not going to stay tuned in for very long. And I'm sure we've all been part of Zoom meetings where somebody who's zooming in, their audio is just terrible and it's hard to hear them, or they sound too far away. The built-in microphone on their laptop or computer is not great quality. And those are hard to pay attention to. Now, if they turned off their webcam and had a great sounding audio, we'd probably pay attention to that for a lot longer, even if we couldn't see them. So as you're thinking about what is the most important thing, what's the priority, if I'm looking at any of this, if I'm looking at technology, I think the microphone is the first priority. And then, cameras and lighting and other stuff later on. So I want to show you an example. I'm going to show you a photo. I took this photo about an hour ago now, because I was still, I tweak things up until the last minute. I like to change things because I'm just a tech nerd, and I like to try new things. And so I took this photo about 45 minutes ago, because I'd gotten everything set up for this how I wanted and what I wanted to show. And so, so this is what I'm standing in front of right now. And you can see, there's a lot of stuff there. I will say the most important thing is in the bottom left, and it's that cup of coffee. None of the rest of this would go well at all if that coffee wasn't there. But I just want to walk through what I'm looking at so that you understand, maybe why I've made the decisions that I've made. First, on the left, I've got a MacBook Pro. It's what I use almost all the time. It's actually running the presentation. So me looking at it right now, it's in presenter view, and I've got these slides up. And then that's connected through an HDMI cable, and there's an adapter that's feeding into. It looks pink in the screen. It's orange on the other side, which is why I purchased it. But that's an Apple iMac. It's a new iMac. That's actually what Zoom is on. So I can see all of your faces on that screen right there, just underneath. So that's my main live streaming computer. And because I do a lot of this specific for clients, I do a lot of streaming. For me, it was worth the investment to do some additional, to make some additional kind of higher end purchases, to get the quality that I was looking for, because ultimately I'm making money from my clients for a lot of the work that I'm doing and for a lot of the work that I've put into it. So that pink monitor kind of there in the middle, again, it's orange on the backside. I can't stress that enough, but that's kind of my live streaming computer. In front of that pink computer, I've got a Surface. As you can tell, I'm an Apple guy. I'm Apple everything, but I do have a Surface because some of the things that I do require kind of a Windows environment. I do a lot of Excel. I do a lot of data work, and it's just easier to use on that Surface. Plus, for this presentation, I'm actually using it in a few minutes to talk about remote presiding officer. I wanted a specific device to kind of make your user experience better. I could certainly make it work on one of the other computers, but it would take a bunch of clicking and exiting out of stuff and reloading. And so we're going to do something hopefully pretty cool in just a minute. So I've got that Surface in the middle. To the left of that, I've got an A10 Mini. Ray and I were talking about that just before we got started. That Surface is connected to that ATEM, and it's a video switcher. It's basically a webcam. It's how I've got it set up. And so I could plug in a camera to that or something like that, and pull it into Zoom or the software that I use to make that work. So that's really great if you've got cameras set up and you're switching between multiple cameras or multiple computers. That device is just extraordinary to have. To the right of that surface, you see a little button pad. That's a Stream Deck. It's got 32 programmable buttons on it that I can do all sorts of fun stuff with. I can mute myself in Zoom. I've got it programmed to do that. I can change what you're seeing just with the press of a button, just like that. Let me go back. Just with a couple of button presses, I can control basically everything that I'm going to need to do while we're on the call with each other today. And something like that is incredibly helpful when you are a one-man show. When you are trying to get everything done, spending some time up front. One, it forces me to think about the flow. How's this meeting or event going to run? And so I can go in and program those buttons for what I'm going to specifically need during that time frame. So right behind that button pad, you'll see there's a little black thing with a dial. That's what I'm using to bring in my audio into my computer. It's a Wave XLR. It's actually brand new. I've got a Rodecaster Pro, which is what Ray and I were talking about. It's a cool little portable. I say portable. I use it in a portable way. Little mixer. It's got 4-channel input. I'm sure I've got a photo of it somewhere. I don't have it on my desk because I'm not using it right now. But I normally am using that. But that Wave XLR is new. And it's a lot smaller. It kind of cleans up my desk a little bit. And since I don't need generally multiple microphones or a lot of sound coming in, I've determined that I don't need to have that kind of bigger mixer sitting here at my desk. To the right of that on the desk is an iPad Pro. It was just sitting there. I use it all the time, but it was just sitting on the desk when I took the photo. Right above that, you can kind of see a little mic. It has Rode written on the front. And you can see it right here on my screen as well. It's on a little boom arm. This is what I was talking about the high quality audio. I could turn my video off and still give this presentation. And while it wouldn't be ideal, it wouldn't be as good as it could be. Hopefully the audio sounds great to you. Hopefully the audio doesn't sound garbled or tinny or distant because I've got a microphone about 1.5 inches from a high-end microphone about 1.5 inches from my mouth. So
can I ask some questions real quick on your equipment?
Please do.
Okay. First, on the left with the stand. A long time ago, I noticed when people were giving Zoom meetings on TV, I saw their laptop material on a stand. So where do you get these stands so that the camera angle is better for you than just seeing up your nose, that
Sure.
sort of stuff. So where do you get that stuff?
Absolutely. So it's going to depend kind of a little bit on the type of laptop that you have will be the best stand for you. I actually, and you can't see it from that photo, but you can see on that laptop, there's a pretty large monitor hanging above it. I believe the brand is Wall-E, WALLE, the letter E. And those are actually just mounted there. And so there's a bar that mounts to my desk. And then there's 2 attachments, a monitor arm and then a laptop arm. And I bought all that off Amazon.
All right. Then my next question was going to be related to the button, the equipment that allows you to control the presentation that you're giving in the sense of the audience participation. If I'm in a Zoom meeting, would I, generally speaking, have the same capabilities, or would that button give me more control over everybody, not just maybe myself? I'm not quite sure what the difference is between that selector and if I was a member of a company that allows you to present.
Sure. Well, so that button allows you to do what you can already do. It doesn't give you kind of any extra features in Zoom that you wouldn't already have. But for example, I don't know where my mouse is on this screen right now on my iMac in the middle. So if I wanted to mute myself, I'd have to find my mouse, and then I'd have to find that cursor and then scroll down. But with this, it's called a Stream Deck. With this, I know where that button's at because I've programmed it, and I can hit that button and be muted in, half a second or whatever. Or I could, um, I could turn my video off or something like that. So, and if you were a host, for example, you could program it to mute all. So when I'm working with clients, I've got a specific kind of profile that I've built out for clients that has a mute all button, because there's nothing more important than being able to mute everybody quickly.
And CJ, don't forget to tell them about the mute Al button. It's very close to the same spelling, but it's just mute Al.
Correct. As Al knows, and Al and I have done a bunch of calls together because we serve on the AIP board together. He thinks that I've got a button program to mute him specifically, and if I could, I would. But that functionality doesn't exist to give me just the ability to mute that one person yet. I'm still looking for it. If you know of a way to do that, please share. I will pay money for that functionality. I promise. But honestly, I'll give since this is amongst Al's parliamentary family, I'll give you a quick hint for how I do that so quickly. So for every meeting that Al and I are a part of, I make him a co-host. And it's not because he needs that permission. It's because co-hosts in Zoom get moved to the top. It would take me an extra second longer to type in his name and find him. But if he's a co-host, it's super easy for me to find him to mute him that way. So,
All right.
anyway.
One more question.
Yeah.
On your microphone, or I don't know if it's a microphone, but what you're speaking into, I would like that information on that and just the general cost of how much that costs. And is that for a simple person? I don't want a lot of high tech stuff, just
sure.
a simple person.
So this is probably not the microphone for that you will want to use, because you need two pieces of equipment to make it. You probably need three pieces of equipment to make it work. You need the microphone, you need the stand, and then you need an audio interface, because this is an XLR microphone, which means it's just an audio connection. It's how most kind of studio microphones are set up. I'm going to have a link in the slides towards the end with a pretty budget-friendly USB microphone that sounds great. It's actually what I use in my office at work.
Okay.
And it sounds great. It's fairly affordable, and you'll get a ton of functionality in a pretty affordable price, I think. So I've got a link for a great microphone at the end. Thank you for those questions. So we've got the iPad, the microphone. So you've probably noticed above that beautiful pink computer is there's another little screen. That's actually a teleprompter. I've got a little screen in there. In that glass, you can kind of see the outline of at least an image of this presentation. Behind that screen is a real camera. It's a Sony camera. It's got an incredible lens on it. It's way overkill for anybody, and I fully admit that. But it's got a camera behind that glass. So actually, what I'm looking at right now, as I'm hopefully making eye contact with you, I'm actually looking at this photo, because that right now that little monitor is an extension of my presentation. So that way I can make sure I'm reading, or at least looking at the right content, but I'm also making eye contact with you, because one of the things that drives me crazy is, doing presentations or being a part of presentations, and the person having to look down to see what's on the screen. And it's not a critique of anybody. I just, when I was building my studio, I wanted to have a way to be able to see my content a little bit higher than just my screen. That way it's a little bit more natural, kind of how we would feel if we were in person. And I've said that a few times. You could probably tell when I was designing my space, I wanted it to be as as if I was presenting in person as possible. I love to present. I love to give presentations. Obviously I love to do it in person. And so I wanted to emulate that as much as I could, so I could make eye contact with a real person audience, and somewhere in the room still see my slides. So so I've got the teleprompter, the camera behind there. Off to the right of that, I've mounted a little webcam. It's actually the one that I'm going to recommend to y'all in just a little bit. It's an incredible webcam. It's just kind of mounted off to the side because I was doing something else where I was showing multiple angles for another presentation I was doing. Actually, and I'm going to go a little bit off script, which I don't like to do. I can show you what that webcam looks like. Probably. So this is the webcam I was pointing at. That's mounted. It's also connected clearly, and I just changed that on this button pad because I pre-programmed it a couple of weeks ago. But again, just as you're building your studio and thinking about what you want that to look like, that may be, having multiple angles, or some people want to have a straight on view, and some people want to have an overhead view if they want to, show something that they're working on or they're reading or something like that. So, yeah, that's that webcam. And then there's a mess of wires behind that. I'm not going to get into, I didn't take a photo of that, but there is a mess of wires and adapters, and it's embarrassing. So, and you can kind of tell just from the photo, there's a mess of wires everywhere. One thing I didn't mention, which I should, is how am I hearing you? I don't actually have any speakers set up on this desk. I'm actually wearing in-ear headphones. They wrap over my ear, and then they just kind of snugly fit in. They're plugged into my audio interface. But I wouldn't have anything on my head in person. And I didn't want to do that here as well. But I also didn't want, as I mentioned earlier, I got kids somewhere in my house. Hopefully they've laid down for their nap at this point. I didn't want any, if I was doing a presentation or doing a client meeting or anything like that, I didn't want any audio escaping. As Marilyn mentioned, I'm also an attorney. And occasionally I have to have conversations that are confidential, or some sort of I do employment law at the House of Representatives, and occasionally this is going to shock you, sometimes elected officials do dumb things. I know it's incredible, and that's the biggest news you'll take from this. I understand that. Sometimes elected officials do dumb things, but as a staffer who works for elected officials, sometimes it's my job to make sure those dumb things don't become news stories, or don't become lawsuits. That's really what I'm worried about. The news stories I could care less about, but the lawsuits I do care about. And so I don't want any of those sort of conversations escaping into the rest of my house. I want to protect my kids from stupidity as long as possible. So that's kind of that setup. When I'm not doing presentations, that large monitor above my laptop, that's connected to my laptop as well. And so I use dual screens for that. I generally have got my email on the screen below, and whatever I'm working on above that. So, but for this, I needed the HDMI cable to come into my teleprompter, so that I could see all this good stuff. I'm glad I hit that button. There's a light up there that you couldn't see. This is an Elgato key light, and I've got a list of the equipment in the next couple of slides. And it's that artificial light, and I can control how bright it is, the warmth, and hopefully this looks natural. Sometimes I look super tan because I've got the warmth up too high. But hopefully this looks natural, and but so I've got this super bright light on top of me. So
CJ, I have a question.
Yeah.
Joe Neglia here. I'm a big fan of open source software. Are there any particular pieces of proprietary code that are like Windows only that you're using, or would you be aware of open source varieties of things?
Yes, there is the open source software and I don't use open source for what I'm doing right now, and I've got the I'll tell you the name of it in just a second. There's an open source software that does all the overlays, and you can get really creative. I think for both PC and Mac, that's called OBS Studio. OBS Studio, that I believe is free. I think there's plugins or modules that people can purchase to get advanced functionality. But all I'm doing right now is I'm feeding all of this, my presentation, all this other stuff into a piece of software, and then that software is giving me an output that Zoom sees as my webcam, basically. And so all of these overlays where you see my name at the bottom, I can take all that off. Yeah, see, I mean, it's gone, and I'll put it right back. And so there's all sorts of things that you can do with software like this. OBS is the one that I know that's open source. The other two that are pretty common, I know I've got in a slide or two.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question. All right. So I want to, again, you're going to have all these slides, but just talk briefly through that equipment. I've got an iMac M1. It's a new Mac. That's that pink computer in the middle. External monitors, the Wave XLR. This is a Rode NT1 microphone. What I'm talking into, that Stream Deck, that says 132 key. That's just a 32 key. I had a 15. I was updating the slide. So that's just a 32 key microphone. 132 would take up the whole desk. So, so sorry about that. There's my camera model. I've got it plugged into, it's got a dummy battery so that it never loses power. That's plugged into a capture card. It's called an Elgato Cam Link. That's how I'm connecting that camera. There's the lens information, the key light, and then the teleprompter information. Here's the software in Zoom, obviously, PowerPoint, obviously. What I'm using right now for these overlays is called Ecamm Live. vMix is Ecamm Live is Mac only. vMix, which is basically the PC alternative, is PC only. And then there's that OBS that I mentioned to Joe. That's an open source version as well. And then there's a teleprompter app that I use. So here are the things that that's kind of budget equipment. And I've got all of these. I've tested all of these, and they work great. And so if I'm traveling, and I'm not traveling for this, but I'm going to have to do some presentations, this is the stuff that I bring with me. That Logitech Brio webcam, and I've got links to all these in the PDF I sent to Ray. That Brio webcam, which is what I demonstrated just a few minutes ago. The Rode NT USB mini microphone. That's what I was mentioning to I think Tina. It's just a little microphone. It plugs in to a USB-A port. You can plug in a set of headphones to the back of it, and it's got a stand. It can sit on your desk, or you can mount it to a boom arm like this, or anything you want, and it sounds fantastic. And then that ring light, that ring light's like $25, at least it was the last time. At least it was when I bought it. But you can set that webcam in that ring light and get a really great lighting all the way around your face. So just some really easy budget options. If I was picking, I think that webcam is $150. That microphone is around $100, and that ring light I think is $25. And again, if I was just picking one of those to start with, it would probably be the microphone. So, so I want to talk quickly about how, as a parliamentarian, you can use this technology or any technology to assist remote presiding officers. So the challenge that all parliamentarians and all staff and anybody that needs to talk to a presiding officer face is, if you were in a real meeting, you could just lean over and grab their arm or poke them or pull on their jacket or shirt sleeve and say, hey, come here, and lean over, and you could discreetly talk into their ear. And it's an interruption, but not everybody's hearing you. In a Zoom meeting, if you're remote, it's incredibly hard to do that. how, other than just interrupting and saying, hey, you screwed that up, or you didn't do that right. I mean, and that's not the job of, as parliamentarians, we know it's not our job to be the story. It's our job to try as discreetly as possible, and it's up for the presiding officer to make a decision based off that advice. So how do you communicate with him discreetly, but also how do you communicate with him timely? I could certainly send a presiding officer a text message and say, hey, you screwed that up. But what if they didn't see that text message because they're presiding, because they've got a script or a screen and a chat and a participants window to pay attention to? So what are some things that we can do? So a couple of two specific potential solutions. The first one is having a separate phone call going on. So I've worked with several groups in several teams that what we'll do is we'll put in, I'll take out one of these earpieces and I'll put another earpiece connected to my phone in, and I'll call the person I'm responsible to talking to. That may be a presiding officer, that might be a staff person, or maybe an elections person, something like that. And I'll get on the call with them, and then I'll mute on my phone, and they'll mute on their phone. That way we're not hearing a weird echo. That way it's important to have that muted. Because if your audio is coming through speakers, that your phone's going to pick that up and it's going to push it through to the other person. So I'm going to hear myself talking in my other ear a second or two later. And that would be distracting for me. So having a separate phone call where both people are muted until you need to say something. So if this was a real meeting and I was in an earpiece with somebody, if I needed to say something to them, it's super important to unmute on your phone and mute yourself in the software. And again, that's why that mute button on that stream deck is so important for me, is because I can hit mute on that button pad, mute myself in Zoom, unmute myself on the phone and say, hey, you messed that up. And then guess what? I've discreetly and timely notified them of an issue. That's a great way as a parliamentarian to be able to do that. It does scare them sometimes because they've forgotten that the other ear is connected to something else. And it's also important for the presiding officer to have a headset in, because if it's just on speakerphone, well, guess what? Their microphone is almost always going to be on. So if they're on speakerphone and you come in over your headset or whatever, more than likely their microphone and then the Zoom channel is going to pick up that phone call. So that's one way to do it. Obviously you can do it in Zoom chat. But again, with all of those where they have to look for the Zoom chat or look for the text message or look for, some sort of app notification. What if they just don't see it? Because they've got a million other things in front of them. Especially if you've got an open chat. Now, if you've got a closed chat where you just tell everybody chat's closed, they're a co-host or the host, and if they see that chat thing pop up, they know it's for them, maybe that works. But what I have found works best as far as quick oral communication with the presiding officer is a separate phone call. The other thing that I think that I've been thinking about a lot is having them read their script from their computer. And this is kind of something I've been kind of testing out and having some thoughts on. But I just kind of want to show you what I'm talking about. So as everyone knows, with like Google Docs or Microsoft OneDrive, where you can collaboratively edit documents at the same time. Hopefully you've all seen that. But one thing that I've been thinking about and kind of testing is, what if my presiding officer was reading the script they had it open in Word or in Google Docs or in a browser or something like that. But then if something came up, I could type in my version and it almost immediately shows that to them. So I've kind of been testing that out as well. And I kind of want to show you what it looks like. if you want to see that. So what I'm going to do is, because I've got to change inputs a little bit. There we go. So I've gone away, and I've got two what look like identical Word documents next to each other. One of them called Parliamentarian and one of them called Presiding Officer. Well, when I showed you that photo, I showed you I had a surface connected. And that's what I've got called Parliamentarian in this image. And then on my MacBook, I've got another Word document open with the exact same file, and it's shared via OneDrive. This is Microsoft. Google would look almost identical, except it'd be in the browser. But basically, both the presiding officer and the parliamentarian are looking at the same document. And if I'm the presiding officer, I could be scrolling down, and you can see that it doesn't change the parliamentarian's version. So what if you're, and so I'm going to make some edits on the parliamentarian side, and I want to show you what it looks like for the presiding officer. So as you're going, if you don't have a phone call, or even if you do, and you need to make them aware of something, well, I believe that the best place to make them aware of something is where you know they're going to be looking at. And hopefully, as parliamentarians, we've done a really good job making them read the script. Something's happened. They need to know something. On the parliamentarian screen, I can say, hey, pause, or whatever I want to say. And you can see it's automatically updating on the other screen on a separate computer, in a separate open Word document. And I think that's pretty cool. If you wanted to, you could add comments, or you could use this however you wanted to, but I thought it would be cool to just do a quick demonstration side by side of how that would work. Or if they missed this, or if they missed something that they were supposed to say, you could come in and highlight it. In just a second or two, it reflects on their screen as well. So, I could talk more about how that works and all of that, but I just thought that was that's a really cool kind of unique way to demonstrate that. So I wanted to share that as kind of a couple of two quick, easy resources to show. I see making them read the script. Isn't that a superpower? I agree, Sally. I mean, in my day job, my most common response when I've got a presiding officer who's an elected official lean over to me and say, oh my gosh, what do I do? And depending on the mood that I'm in, I'm a little bit sarcastic. If you didn't know that already, I just kind of fake freak out and say, oh my gosh, read the script. And that works out pretty well. So I know I've only got about a couple of minutes left. I want to show, and this is the first time I've shown anybody these photos from a hybrid meeting, from AIP's hybrid annual session. These are so secret, even the AIP president, the Honorable Al Gage, hasn't seen them yet. So I just want to share a couple of quick, maybe just 3 photos of our hybrid meeting. And then if I have, enough time for any questions, I'll be happy to take those. So this is what Al saw as he was presiding. He's got a podium there. You can see there's a couple little light panels there. We've mounted a screen. And you can see it to the left there a little bit, off to the side. And that was connected to a little HDMI switcher. And what this device does is, with the press of a button, you can change the input. So everything, the output is always going into that screen, but the input might change based off the button. So for example, input 1 was Al's script that was connected to his laptop, so he could see his script as he was going. Input 2 was the chat monitor, which was connected to another device. So if there was ever somebody in the queue to get recognition, he or the chat monitor could hit that button and it would change from his script to that list without ever him having to look at it at a different device or look a different way. I see Al's unmuted. He might want to say something.
It's on the right, CJ. I don't know whether it's reversed in your screen, but the little monitor is on the right, not the left.
Right. I'm sorry. The right. Correct. It's not reversed on my screen. I'm just, I just don't know how to tell right from left.
That wasn't on the bar exam?
It was not on the bar exam.
Okay.
Because on the bar exam, the answer would be, it depends. Which way are you looking? So on the presider's right, thanks, Al. There's that little black thing that looks like it's floating and levitating a little bit. There's a little arm holding it there. So, and he could see either his screen or the chat monitor screen. There's the switcher. This is actually the same setup I'm using for my teleprompter. So this was all stolen from my home office. So, and then this was Tech Central. Ray, this was my one-man show. This is what we
Nice.
used to power a hybrid annual session. And you can see I've got a bunch of monitors. I've got the buttons. I've got my little ATEM Mini in there somewhere, and I've got that Rodecaster Pro. This was the brain for hybrid annual session. And you know, with the exception of one or two technical glitches, everything hopefully worked well. If you attended and you disagree, please email president@aipparl.org, and that'd be great. So I wanted to show that, and then just wrap up and answer any questions or thoughts that anybody might have.
Thank you so much, CJ, for your wonderful presentation. Lots of information for things that we don't think about. And this is really so great. Unfortunately, we're out of time for questions. So, and I'm assuming that you can be reached for questions if necessary.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. And again, thank you so much for enlightening all of us in this this age of change as we move forward.
I muted myself. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed being here.
Thank you again.